welcome to Diplomatic Channel. I'm Amarachi Ubani. This week, as Ukraine, Russia and the UN put pen to a deal that will allow the export of grain out of Ukraine through the Black Sea, we ask how soon the impact of the exports will be on the African continent. My guest is Professor Jonathan Aremu, a professor of international economics and trade at Covenant University and an economic ECOWAS advisor and NESG facilitator of Trade, Investment and Competitive Policy Commission. He joins us to examine the deal, the impact, as well as how this might help resolve the Russian war in Ukraine. But as usual on the program, let's take a quick check on other discussions in diplomatic circles, and we'll be right back. The Nigerians in Diaspora Commission has commiserated with the family of a Nigerian, Michael Chima Ichefu, who was shot dead by robbers in Johannesburg, South Africa. In her message to the family, the chairman, Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, Abike Dabiri Erewa, assured the family that proper investigation will be made into the matter to fish out the perpetrators and repatriate the remains of Mr. Ichefu. She called on South African authorities to look into the matter and punish those behind the killing. Michael Ichefu was reportedly shot and killed by a gang who robbed him at his shop in Risik Anjopa Street. The Nigerian embassy in Moscow has held an art exhibition for young Russian artists with the theme, How I Imagined Nigeria. The event was attended by members of the diplomatic corps, head of the Moscow Museum of Modern Arts, chairman of NIDO Russia, and members of the Nigerian community in Russia and the business community, amongst others. Nigeria's ambassador to Russia with concurrent accreditation to the Republic of Belarus, Professor Abdullahi Shehu, said the event was organized to strengthen relations between Nigeria and Russia through citizens' cultural diplomacy. The event was supported by Russian multinational energy corporation Lukoil. Professor Shehu said the exhibition was a clear attestation to the dedication and talent of the artists who were able to project Nigeria in their various artworks without having traveled to the country. Winners in various categories were awarded prizes and certificates.
The aim is to have a feeling of how Nigeria is perceived by people in Russia. And that is why the theme of the project is, How Do I Imagine Nigeria?
Finally, China has promised to partner with Nigeria to develop research into economic affairs in hopes of scaling up agricultural production technology. The commitment was made by the Chinese ambassador to Nigeria during a meeting on the application of Chinese technology to agriculture organized by the Africa Union Development Agency, NEPAD, in Abuja, Nigeria's federal capital territory.
We have a huge gap between the development and the potential. That means the potential and also the development. So I think, how can we close the gap in the 21st century? We need good practice. We need good example. We need new technology. So I hope that today's event, really UN team affiliations, people, their organizations can do things for Nigeria.
We can move closer to the goal of attaining zero hunger, sustainable development goal 2, if we explore new options like the Jonker technology.
Welcome back. On Friday last week, representatives from the Ukrainian and Russian governments signed a deal in Istanbul, Turkey, with the United Nations present to resume grain shipments from Ukrainian ports to international markets via the Black Sea. Leaders around the world hope this is the first step to curbing looming food crisis caused by the war in Ukraine.
The landmark deal between Russia and Ukraine was signed on Friday to reopen the Ukrainian Black Sea for grain exports, raising hopes that an international food crisis aggravated by the Russian invasion can be eased. The accord crowned 2 months of talks brokered by the United Nations and Turkey, which UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said were aimed at restoring Ukrainian grain exports while easing Russian grain and fertilizer shipments despite tough Western sanctions on Moscow. The Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan said the deal will help prevent famine and ease global food inflation, calling on Russia and Ukraine to end their conflict. Turkey, a NATO member that has good relations with Russia and Ukraine alike, controls the straits leading into the Black Sea.
Ensuring world supply security in agriculture and food products is important in many respects. With this step, possible additional price increases due to the loss of productivity caused by the heat wave and drought will be prevented. We also help to control food inflation, which has become a global problem.
The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, who was present at the signing, said the accord opens the way to significant volumes of commercial food exports from three key Ukrainian ports, Odessa, Chernomorsk, and that the UN set up a coordination center to monitor implementation of the deal.
The shipment of grain and food stocks into world markets will help bridge the global food supply gap and reduce pressure on high prices.
Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov confirmed the signing of the deal, saying it was done despite Kiev's comments to undermine it. In a video address, he said, uninterrupted exports meet the urgent tasks of maintaining food security, especially for developing and least developed countries. Ukraine's infrastructure minister, in an interview with Ukrainian TV, said the agreement was made possible by recent successes of Ukrainian armed forces and Ukrainian naval forces. Alexandra Kubrakov said a particularly important moment was the liberation of Snake Island. It allowed it open Bystra River mouth. This is Ukraine's passage to the Danube, and adding that Russians were made to guarantee they will not approach the safe passage corridor fixed in the agreement. Before the deal, the U.S. Development Agency USAID Administrator Samantha Power said she was hopeful the talks had on Friday will bear fruit.
We are really hopeful that the negotiations that the United Nations has been undertaking with Turkey, Russia, and the Ukrainian government will bear fruit, and that those foods will be freed to be able to reach their intended, desired targets.
But the United States had said it will hold Russia accountable for implementing the deal and called out China for stockpiling grain that could be used for global humanitarian needs. China's grain stocks at the end of the 2021-2022 season were estimated by the International Grain Council to be 323.4 million tons, more than half of the global total of 607.4 million. It dwarfs those of the United States, the world's top grain exporter, which were estimated at 57.8 million tons. The Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said on Friday that Western nations will be watching closely to ensure Ukraine will not be put at risk of being further invaded by Russia after the two nations signed the landmark deal to reopen the Black Sea ports for grain exports.
Canada's confidence in Russia's reliability is pretty much nil. They have demonstrated nothing but poor faith. They have precipitated a global energy crisis, a global food crisis with their illegal invasion of Ukraine, and the rest of us have been working very, very hard to try and mitigate those issues around the world.
However, Ukrainian farmers remain worried that safe export routes for their grain are not ensured by the UN-brokered agreement signed on Friday as the Odessa port was hit by missiles. A blockade of Ukrainian ports by Russia's Black Sea fleet, trapping tens of millions of tons of grain in silos and stranding many ships, has worsened global supply chain bottlenecks, along with sweeping sanctions, stuck galloping inflation in food and energy prices around the world. Moscow has denied responsibility for the worsening food crisis, blaming instead the Western sanctions for slowing its own food and fertilizer exports and Ukraine for mining the approaches of its Black Sea ports.
Let's bring in Professor Jonathan Aremu, a professor of international economics and trade at Covenant University and a consultant at the Economic Community of West African States on Common Investment Markets in Abuja. Amongst the many caps that he wears, he's also an NESG facilitator of Trade, Investment and Competitiveness Policy Commission for the federal government. He's a life member of the Nigerian Economic Society, the Nigerian Society of International Law, a member of the NIIA, and a member of the editorial board of the Canadian Institute for International Law Expertise in Toronto and the Journal of NSIL. He joins me now from our studio in Abuja. Professor Aremu, thank you for joining me on the program.
Thank you. Good evening, viewers.
Let's begin with your thoughts on the deal that was signed in Turkey on Friday. A lot of people were skeptical about Russia signing it and, what may be, the conditions given for this deal to finally have pen put to paper. They felt that Russia might have some hidden demands, especially on the Ukrainian side. What were your thoughts on it?
The deal is a good one because everybody feels scared about the crisis between Russia and Ukraine, particularly Nigeria, because our import bill of wheat from both countries is quite high. And therefore, when such a bill was signed, we all felt that it's going to be good. But just as you have said, just yesterday, at that particular port, the Black Sea port, we discovered that Russia equally fired missiles. And that is it. It's becoming very difficult to trust what Russia can do because, how can you sign what a very wonderful bill witnessed by Turkey and the United Nations, and less than 24 hours, you went again, bombing the environment. I don't think it's a good development.
Global security is said to have been impacted by this war, of course. But was it really, the war that really tipped the balance on food production and exports?
Russia is a major producer of wheat in the global economy. So also is Ukraine. In fact, Ukraine is number 5 when we are talking of countries that are exporting wheat into the global economy. So if the supply of wheat into global economy from both countries is disrupted by this crisis, definitely the global supply will go down. And in simple economic terms, when the supply is less than the demand, obviously the price will jump up. And you may not even know the extent of the jumping up of the price. But more importantly, quite a lot of other things that accompany agriculture in terms of input of agricultural production may be affected in terms of fertilizer and other major inputs in production processes.
Yeah, but you also find, Ukraine saying, as the war progressed, it said that it had enough grains to feed its own population. But the problem, of course, was exports.
Obviously.
Grains were meant for export, were already rotting away, in the warehouses. Now, I'm just wondering, why countries like Nigeria... Yeah, just wondering why countries like Nigeria and other African countries couldn't do the same thing, produce grains for just sustenance, just for their own populations. I know there were interventions by the federal government, but that, of course, is not enough.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. That Ukraine will say that they have enough for domestic consumption. Yes, because they are no longer exporting. See, Ukraine exports about 40% of its production. So the 40% added to what they were consuming in the economy, that will be oversupply of the economy as well. So they may not have any problem with respect to issue of exporting of grains, particularly wheat. So what they said is just a truism. But the issue, just as they said, is export. You see, they can't export. And the implication of that, which Ukraine have not talked about, is that we have farmers whose life depends upon what they can export to be able to earn income. So, will they depend on selling to the domestic economy alone? The answer is no. They have been getting substantial import deals from outside the world. And this is how they were able to continue producing. Once this foreign exchange is not coming, sooner or later it's going to affect the domestic production because there will not be enough financial resources to be able to continue producing, even domestically.
My conversation with Professor Jonathan Aremu continues after the break. Please stay with us. And now back to my conversation with Professor Jonathan Aremu. Talking about trust, though, And I know that it will take a while before distribution begins out of out onto the Black Sea, and then countries begin to get their quota, of grains exports and energy and so on. What are stopgap measures is Nigeria taking at this time while we're waiting?
I think that is one of the best questions which you are asking me this evening. That, you see, should we continue relying on what other people say to be able to feed ourselves? We need to be able to have a sort of, a policy to be able to cushion the effect of some of this backlash of global economic policies and unnecessary interferences. What do we have in Nigeria? Well, we are not prepared for this. We are not even part of the negotiation anyway. But even if the negotiation did not happen, what have we been doing to be able to make sure that this crisis will not affect us? Definitely speaking, my sister, I cannot say well what we have been doing. Over the years, I remember in the 1980s, we have quite a lot of states in Nigeria that are wheat-producing states. And government give these states money to start producing wheat. But where are we now in production? I was looking at some figures and I discovered that as low as 5% of the wheat demand in Nigeria is coming from Nigeria. And I know that, well, by the climatic conditions, Nigeria may not be among the wheat-producing countries in the world. That is to say, wheat thrives very well under a cool temperate grassland. When you talk of the prairies of North America, steppes of Asia, the downs of Australia, the pampas of Argentina. Yes, those are areas where wheat grow. But we have some states in Nigeria, like Plateau State, Taraba State, part of Benue State, part of Kogi State, that have similar sort of temperate climate that can produce this. What are we doing? I'm not aware. Secondly, is the fact that we discovered that in the production of bread particularly, they discovered that we can use cassava. I have not been able to know the percentage of cassava that form the raw material in the production of bread in Nigeria. I do have that statistics also. So seriously speaking, I think we need to sit up because we cannot expect the global economy to be okay before we can feed ourselves. And that is why Nigeria Economic Summit Group in February actually said that issue of food security is so much important in Nigeria, not only in production, even in the quality of food that we eat. Because you go into Nigeria, quite a lot of our city, people just eat mess. And then they have problem of one sickness or the other. Secondly, is that the production of the food is not even there. I mean, you are aware of the various problems, even in Nigeria, in the production of food, in which bandits don't allow farmers to go to market, to farm, sorry. So these are the issues I think that we need to sit up.
You rightly pointed out the food security or food insecurity only worsens national security as a problem we're having in Nigeria. And then national insecurity is threatened by food insecurity. And the EU has imposed, a myriad of sanctions against Russia, hoping that it will force the hand of the Russian President Vladimir Putin to end this war. Now, when the war is ended, and I know that, there are countries that are siding with Russia this time, silent partners, how do you perceive, the world global trade to become when this war is over?
Well, that's okay. When the war is over, clearly speaking, there may be renegotiation of the terms of agreement that connect everyone. In fact, I see some development may come up at World Trade Organization Ministerial Conference to be able to make sure that this kind of a thing does not happen again. During the last month, we have the Ministerial Conference of WTO, the 12th Ministerial Conference, and part of the side discussion, which was not tabled as a major thing, is this issue of problem of food security as a result of Ukraine and Russia. I think that will actually affect the current position that the World Trade Organization will have to look into. But what I'm saying is that, well, right now, because of the sanctions from Europe against Russia, which is going to affect their export into other countries, it's going to affect quite a lot of other things. If we are prepared in Nigeria, it's a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity because we have substantial arable land to be able to produce a lot of enormous agricultural products, including wheat. I can recollect many of the states that were declared wheat producing states. Can we not go back and do research into even producing wheat in a grassland, savanna grassland of Nigeria? It may be possible that a species of wheat may be grown not only in temperate good grassland, but also in a warm grassland like savanna we are having. But nothing has been done in that area. I think we need to really look at what affects us more, because the global economy now relies totally on the agreement which everybody is signing. People are just, going against the agreement, and it can affect anyone.
That's a great point that you make. And about the poverty and the severe hunger, even in East Africa, there are reports of about 18 million people at risk, of severe hunger on the continent. So yes, Russia has promised it will fulfill its commitments to the rest of Africa. But here's the thing. The U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says the U.S. will impose harsh consequences on countries that abuse or break international economic order. I'm sure she's referring to Russia here. And then she encouraged countries to completely boycott Russia. She was saying this, during her visit to South Korea. African countries have stopped short of condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In fact, they don't want to be involved in the conversations. They're just calling on both parties to, call off the war, stop the, the violence and everything. But when the U.S. speaks like this, do you think that Africa, perhaps even Nigeria, might be affected by these consequences the U.S. is talking about?
Well, definitely it's going to have consequences on us. And that is why, as much as possible, we have to make sure we look into what African Continental Free Trade Area can offer us. I believe that there are some African countries that are producing wheat. I mean, we have temperate climate in South Africa. And South Africa, I'm not just talking of the country, I'm talking of the regions of South Africa. There are quite a lot of countries in that particular zone, particularly the SADC zone, which comprises about 8 or 9 countries. And quite a lot of them can produce wheat. Now, on the African Continental Free Trade Area, we can actually make sure that we go into possibility of getting the importation of our wheat from that area. And that is it. Apart from looking at what to do to develop the opportunity in Nigeria, but to be relying on these sanctions of America, another agreement, my sister, Amarachi, I mean, what happened yesterday is a serious disappointment. And for my own personal end, I think in the global economy, I go back to the title of one of my books, which says that the global economy never gives you what you want. You only got what you negotiate. But even what you negotiate now is not becoming a reality. So
you think Africa can negotiate?
I don't know the future.
Do you think Africa can negotiate?
Is that what?
Do you think Africa can negotiate?
Okay, that's another problem. That's another problem. That's another problem. Our negotiation capacity is equally very weak. But when we are negotiating among ourselves, it will not be a tough negotiation like the one that happened between Africa and European Union on the Economic Partnership Agreement, or between Africa and WTO ministerial conferences. Among ourselves, we are more or less on the more or less equal economic development level, and then our negotiation will not be too tough. So we can actually have access to a good negotiation among ourselves to be able to make sure we get what we want among ourselves. And back to what the president said, that let us eat what we produce and produce what we eat.
Professor Aremu, a real pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for speaking with me on Diplomatic Channel.
Thank you.
This is where we end the program this week. Don't forget you can watch other episodes as well as this one again on our website, channelstv.com, or log on to youtube.com/channelsweb. Go to the playlist and look for Diplomatic Channel. I'm Amarachi Ubani. I'll see you next time.